Welcome to Independence Guitar. If this is your first time here, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. If you actually want to receive notifications, check the bell and help me out by liking and sharing the video. So again, the most commonly talked about topic when it comes to guitar on the internet by far is tone. There are many different schools of thought when it comes to tone. There are a lot of people that say it's all in the hands. There's a lot of people that spend loads of money on gear. If I had a gun to my head and had to give my opinion on it, I would say it's probably about 90 to 95% the player and 5 to 10% the gear. Now when it comes to the conversation surrounding gear and tone, it's a very, very large conversation that is on the internet. However, I feel it's a very narrow one. It's not very broad, and I feel that it deserves a lot larger of a search into finding good tone. Many metal tones in the modern age sound very similar because people are using the same plugins, they're using the same amp sims, the same IRs, they're using the same V30s, and there's just no variation. So much of it comes out sounding the exact same. It's almost like there's a standard tone, the standard metal tone, and that's the tone that you have to have or not. And I think that that does kind of an injustice to metal, because if you listen to the progression of tone through the years, starting with the early days of Black Sabbath all the way up to, newer gent tones, they are so wildly different. Being that there is so much variety, it's hard to believe that so much of it is starting to sound the same. I feel that tone to a musician should be almost like a search or a quest to find that perfect tone that they love, but something that's different, something that is different from what you hear on every single metal album these days. And in that conversation, I hear nonstop talk about pickups, amps, and even tone wood, but I don't hear too much conversation about cabs and speakers. Now, as touchy as the argument is around tone wood, for as little difference as it makes, I would think that speakers and cabs would be a lot more part of that conversation. After all, the speakers that are in your cab are at the end of your chain and actually make the sound that your amp and your pickups and your tone wood and your pedals are making. So when it comes to trying to set your own tone apart from other people's, speakers and cabs are probably the first thing that you should look at when trying to do that. So I originally intended to make this video, this big, long, epic, massive video, 30-40 minutes long, comparing all different kinds of amps and cabs, from valve tube amplifiers to solid state and modelers, and run them through all these different kinds of cabs and see what kind of tones and see the difference. But I feel like tone deserves a lot more respect than that. I feel like that quest deserves a lot more respect than that. So I've decided that I'm going to break the videos up and do one or two comparisons at a time. So today the comparison, or experiment rather, that I wanted to do was compare a set of more expensive speakers in an expensive cab, one that is loaded with greenbacks and V30s, and compare those to some very inexpensive Celestion speakers that are loaded inside of a Marshall MG cab. If you know anything about Marshall MG cabs, you know that they go for about $100 to $150 used, or I think less than $300 new. And if you've ever been on any forum, you will see that they get a ton of hate. So what I wanted to do is compare those cheap Celestion speakers to the ones in my Friedman. Now, my Friedman is actually loaded with greenbacks and vintage 30s, but today I want to focus on the greenbacks. Maybe in the next video I will focus on the vintage 30s, but today I'm going to focus on the greenbacks because they are pretty much equally as expensive and almost equally as sought after. And to me, this experiment is not really about the cost of the speakers, it's just about the difference in the sound. Because when it comes to these cabs and speakers, it doesn't really matter how much money you spend on them, it's just the end result of the sound that's coming out of them. Better or worse, good and bad is all subjective. So again, I want to show you these tones, and then maybe you can decide which one you like better. So let's go ahead and kick off the experiment, and let's hear some tones. So there you have it. As you can tell from the audio, each cab has a very different sound. Now, I am not here to tell you that one is better than the other. You have to decide on your own whether you liked the sound of the more expensive cab and greenbacks, or whether you like the sound of the very inexpensive Marshall. I think a lot of people put too much emphasis on how much they spend on their gear, and while generally you get what you pay for, and if you pay for a more expensive amp and cab, you're going to get a much better sound, you have to also take into consideration that music and tone is subjective. In my opinion, from what I can hear in the room and what I hear in the audio, I very much prefer the sound of the greenbacks over the sound of the MG cab. The reason being is that through the greenbacks, a lot of the harsh frequencies that live on the high end of the spectrum are now kind of trimmed off. The low mid-range seems to be scooped a little, while the high mid-range is very present, giving it a very aggressive sound. And the bass response, while is very present, is very tight. However, on the MG cab, it seems to be kind of balls to the wall, all out. You get all of the frequencies. It can be very harsh. It has a very open low mid-range, which can cause the sound to get kind of flubby and kind of almost like out of control sounding, but not in a good way. and then it has a very open low end, which also ends up being kind of fluffy. So the main point that I wanted to convey is that my opinion means nothing as to what suits you. You're the one that has to decide, did you like the MG cab better or did you like the greenbacks better? I would suggest going back and maybe closing your eyes and giving a listen and really asking yourself, do you like the sound of one or the other cab over the other? And I think the main takeaway is that whatever cab you have, it's not necessarily that it's good or bad, but mainly that it's different. And in today's age, where a lot of the tones are starting to sound very similar and very recycled, very much the same, it's a good thing to have a different sounding tone. Anyway, let me know down in the comments, which one did you like better and why? And what kind of cab do you use? What do you like about it? Also, hit the subscribe button, check the bell so that you get future notifications, and you can stay up to date on my tone videos, because I am going to run the entire gambit of mic placement, chords, amps, cabs, and show all the different kinds of tones and how you can make them usable. Because it's not about how much money you spend on your gear, it's about how you use it in the end. And in my opinion, 90 to 95% of the tone comes from your hands anyway. So you should be practicing your technique, your skill, and not worried about what you're playing through. But if you are trying to get serious, I hope these videos will help you to maybe decide and kind of get an idea of what you might want to spend on a cab and what kind of cab you need. So please join me as I go on and explore these things. Hopefully I will see you in the future. I'm out.